Hey everyone, welcome to the GTM Pack podcast. I'm your host, Justin Dorfman, and today we're joined by Akash Bansal, the co-founder of Storylane. Akash, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me here, Justin. Excited to be talking to the folks. Yeah.
Yeah, no, really excited. I'm a big fan of Storylane, and I've been following you on LinkedIn, and you're sharing some great insights there. So I was really excited to chat today.
Yeah,
But
same here.
Awesome. Well, to start, it would be really great just to hear a little bit about you, your background, and sort of your journey to starting Storylane.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I have been doing companies before. So this is my second company. My first one was like in the preschool area where we made a SaaS solution. And we ran it for I ran it for 7 years. This culminated eventually in a PE buyout. So it was a good exit. We bootstrapped our way through. And I learned quite a few lessons as part of that whole whole company. And out of the insights there, basically, when we were dealing with these preschool owners and our customers, we saw how difficult it was to show the product, right? So that is where actually it was very challenging. And the some of the bits and pieces there like came about and then finally translated into what we would eventually do in Storylane as like an interactive demo platform. So but back to like what my experience in the previous company was, one of the things that I do see entrepreneurs doing a lot is working hard. But I think few things I've learned, and those translate into like how you just take care of your well-being, but also focus on customers is very critical. So along the way, what we realized was the buying journey was broken, uh, and not just as we selling to preschool owners, but also when we were buying products. So a case in point is we took a demo from Churn Zero. This was like a company that helps reduce churn, right? And there were like really three hoops to really finally get to see a demo. And that's where I realized, oh, this needs to change. And it's exceptionally difficult to really buy a product, a B2B, and it needs to really translate into a different experience. So out of those insights is when I started Storylane. And this, we went through YC and finally here we are, right? Doing Storylane for the last 3 years.
That's super interesting. I always find it interesting when founders start companies based on pain points that they experienced at the last company. I think that's always a really great starting point. And it sounds like that was the case for you guys. But for those that maybe aren't as familiar with Storylane and even interactive product demos, can you tell us a little bit about what interactive product demos are and how folks are using them to support the buying process, as you mentioned?
Yeah, so interactive demos essentially are as close to the product as you can get without having to get a POC or sign up for a product, right? As in a trial. So what it essentially is we are able to do in Storylane is have you easily capture your screens as in the front end of the product. And this is for SaaS products primarily, right? And then showcase that, add tooltips on top of that to essentially go through a story. So what marketeers are trying to do is tell the story behind the product, what kind of benefits you are able to bring in. So with those tooltips and some interactive guides, uh, you have the people go through the product, and different personas can experience it in their own way, right? uh, on the buyer side. And what an interactive product is, with that shareable asset that these product marketeers or these GTM teams are creating with their buyers, they are able to share it in formats like you can embed it on the website. You can also send it to your prospects during the buying cycle. Let's say you have a demo call, right? As an AE, you would want to send it even before the demo call so that your prospect gets a very good sense of what your company does, what you do, and after follow up after also with some of the details that specifically to the use case they were asking for. So therein basically lies this opportunity that it is product led growth. It drives product led growth for any company that has a very difficult experience. Let's say they have multiple integrations to go with, right? Uh, so how do you have people still experience the product without getting into the product? So that's what it is able to drive for most of the B2B SaaS companies. So yeah, that's what Storylane does.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I remember myself coming across interactive product demos maybe like 2 or so years ago. And it sounded like at the time the main use case was sort of putting it on your website as a replacement to a demo video or something like that, something that's more interactive. And I remember actually it's one of the ways that I re-engaged with my co-founder, George. I was a product marketer at the time, so he was deep in the interactive product demo space, and I was part of, I think, a panel of potential customers that was giving feedback on the concept, right? But you mentioned a couple of other use cases. So you mentioned, AEs sending it as well. It sounds like the space has evolved a lot since I first heard of it, right? Where it was just, put it on your website. I'm curious, what are the most common use cases you're seeing today beyond the two that you mentioned, the website and the AE sending it? And it sounds like there's also different personas that are now using it, right? At the beginning, it sounded like it was product marketers or maybe even demand gen folks, who sort of own the website and the lead capture. But now you mentioned AEs. I'm curious, who are the various personas that make up your customer base?
Yeah, so the first is, of course, the product marketeers, right? Where they want to have the buyers engaged right there, right? The demand gen folks creating. And therein, basically, either on the website or you can have even your BDRs and SDRs send little snippets of those product demos right in the email for anybody to get excited. But more so, besides the AEs, the sales engineering. So sales engineering spends or pre-sales spends an inordinate amount of time just to personalize the demos. So therein actually you have a whole HTML of the entire product, and if you can make it easily a bit editable, personalizable through the use of what we call as dynamic variables, you are able to just change everything in the demo and personalize it to the user that is going to or the industry segment that you're sending it to, right? So that's the other kind of persona that is able to use it. And sales engineering is also able to use it for live demo use cases, right? Essentially, you can get on a Zoom call and instead of your actual product, you are able to show this essentially captured product that is a mini demo sandbox for you. And you don't get any junk data. You have the most pristine data to show it to people. So further down the sales funnel also is something that we started to do more and more, and we are seeing a lot of interest there. Essentially, AEs, pre-sales, and sales engineering folks using the product. And then finally, it also translates into customer education and customer success even after they have they start to become customers, where we ourselves use our own dog food. We have it in our help centers, and a lot of our customers. Only yesterday, we were having a webinar with of Storylaners, right? And there were about 100 odd people in the webinar, and there we saw 60% of them using it for prospects, then another 60% for sales enablement, and there was about 25% of those using it for customer education as well. So we see a broad set of use cases that have come about with this really shareable asset, which is as close to the product as it can get, which is interactive demos. Yeah.
Super interesting. I'm curious, when companies have multiple buyer personas like yourself, like your company, how do you approach marketing to multiple personas, right? Is it a sort of land and expand sort of approach? So do you focus on, say, the product marketer as the obvious entry point, and then sort of expand the use cases once you're in the account, or do you have multiple campaigns running at any given time targeting different users? What's your viewpoint on that, on sort of marketing and selling to multiple personas?
So we have like two primary personas, like definitely marketeers, uh, demand gen, that is one, right? And the second is sales engineering. So those are the two primary personas that get excited. And we primarily just focus our outbound efforts or our marketing on those two personas. And then when we get in, of course, it's a land and expand in the customers area, so they start to educate their other teams, bring in other teams, and definitely there's much more interest within those additional teams that start to use Storylane. So yeah, that is the approach right now.
Makes a lot of sense. Back to your point that you made earlier, you mentioned PLG and product led, and I think interactive product demos are sort of a leading tool when it comes to implementing a product led growth strategy. And we've obviously heard a lot about PLG in the last couple of years. It's been sort of the big conversation. Sort of I guess, a parallel conversation that I'm starting to hear is, over the last decade, let's say, a lot of technologies were really focused on sales and sales processes and streamlining the sales process, providing more information, data, and tools to guide the sales process. Now it seems it might just be me, imagining this, or, maybe it's something that seems to be bubbling up, which is the shift to like buyer enablement. And the conversation is more about the buying process being extremely complicated and helping buyers, throughout that process, giving them the information in the data, which obviously also in the end helps the salesperson. But it seems like there's been this shift from sort of the focus on the sales side to the focus on the buyer. I've seen you post a little bit about that as well. I've seen some content that Storylane has created. So I wanted to, first of all, confirm I'm not just imagining this. This is like a movement that's starting to take off, and get your perspective on why is this happening now, and why is it so important, and why are you guys focusing on this trend?
Yeah, indeed. Actually, that's a very big part of like what we believe in here. And it has completely turned around. Essentially, buyers are starting to drive the conversation, and sellers still, actually, quite a bit of them still are in the early 2000s when SaaS started to came into being, right? You cannot be selling like what you were selling 10 years back. The Gen Z and is upon us, right? And they're actually coming into the workforce. So with all what they have seen in B2C, they want to translate that same kind of experience in B2B. So it's a buyer's world, and we at Storylane believe that these buyer bottlenecks need to be removed. Actually, we have a newsletter which is called Buyer Bottlenecks. So we want to remove the buyer bottlenecks, and you cannot be a seller and start putting gates for your buyers to be able to really see the product, right? And that's a very big shift. Uh, so so buyers need to, when they are on the website, they need to be able to see what they quickly, right? Instead of waiting like multiple days over and over multiple rounds of conversations. So there has been a massive shift there, and companies that will win, if you are not wanting to lose your business to your competitors who are very agile on the product led growth front, then it is time to really start thinking from a very buyer's angle and seeing how you can enable them and get them into the door, get them more interested, uh, and go from there.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm starting to see this trend as well right now about, I think we've heard it over the years, that cold calling and cold emailing and sort of mass blasting out there is losing its effectiveness. But it seems like, especially with the current economy that we're in, and some of the generational changes that you just mentioned, right, of who the buyers are, it seems, I don't know, that like that's really starting to happen. And I've started to see folks on my LinkedIn feed share data about, like, real data on the dropping effectiveness the amount of people that are picking up cold calls and responding to cold emails. So thinking from the buyer's perspective and what their customer journey looks like, and figuring out ways to insert yourself into that journey rather than trying to bombard them and get in their face seems like the right approach, or at least the right train of thinking at this point in time.
Yeah, be there for the buyer when they need you, right? And that's because most of the buyers have already done their research by the time actually they are coming and landing on your website. And there they want instant education and understanding where you are. They already know the benefits. There's quite a few things they already know about you. And that instant aha moment is what actually some of these demo experiences give you.
Great. In terms of the interactive product demo space, I'm curious, what are the trends that you're seeing? I think I remember sort of the first use cases you mentioned was always to give prospects exposure to the product, and that for them allow them to sort of see how it looks and feel it. But then I started to see things around the insights and the data that also come out of these tools, and how they enable sellers to figure out the right times to engage, or even the right messaging based on the activity and the behavior that folks that are in those demos are using. But there's also now this major topic of AI out there, and everybody's talking about how AI applies to every single product out there. So I'm curious, what are the big trends in interactive demos? Where are you seeing this space going forward? And does AI play a role in that? Is there a play that you are sort of exploring with AI or have already implemented? What does the next 5-10 years look like for this space?
Yeah, we think about this a lot, right? Well, thinking 10 years out, right, Justin, what would you want to see when you are really on a product page, or you're on a company website? Really be able to get an instant demo. Think about like you being able to talk to a salesperson on demand and they being able to answer your questions. That is essentially where we will be 10 years from now. And this is where actually Storylane is going to play a big role. So we have started down that path. So some of the few things that we already have in the product, like AI text to voice. So there can be an instant voiceover that they can add. Then there is a chat GPT like feature where you can prompt your way through, and then it will give you a fairly good and generic output in terms of what those tooltips are and guides, right? Knowing about your product. So those are some automation capabilities, definitely. So there are 2-3 trends that will happen. One is for the people who build these interactive demos, how easy it is for them to create those demos and then bring all those pieces of interactive demos in a curated experience, catering to the personalized journey of the buyer or the user persona that is experiencing it. Okay? That's one shift on the production side of interactive demos. Right? The other is going to be how on when people, eventual consumers or your prospects are experiencing it, how we take them through these journeys and answer their questions easily. And the third is more essentially getting them to as much of a live experience as you could potentially get them to. And this is going to be a journey as AI technologies evolve. And eventually there needs to be a replacement of some of the early buying process where there's a lot of like face-to-face initial conversations that can be replaced with what we would say as a much more live interactive experience for the buyer.
Yeah, I love that future world, because I actually saw a video that I think you guys posted a little while ago on YouTube, and it was sort of like a little bit of a joke, talking about the buying experience and how you have to go through all these hoops, right, in order to even see the product, right, and just watching that video, I've been through that experience multiple times, and it's not a great experience. And I think interactive product demos have already, opened the door to seeing and feeling the product. But now, if you're talking about, personalizing that experience even more, as well as having a way of even answering questions and providing insight to the buyer before they have to commit that. I think in your video, the 90-minute call that you have to commit at the even before knowing anything about the product. It makes a lot of sense, right? And again, I think it is in tune with the generation of buyers that we're going to be engaging with now and in the next decade. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's very thrilling to be on a ride, like where all of this is going and how you can enable experiences for the buyers where they feel they are able to get instant answers, and also more importantly, they feel thrilled at what they are seeing about the products that they want to go for.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I want to switch gears slightly here from talking about interactive product demos and talk a little bit more about your background as a founder and sort of your mindset as a founder. So you mentioned that your last company, you bootstrapped that to an exit. And I've noticed that with Storylane as well, you've taken a pretty conservative approach when it comes to fundraising and keeping the team relatively lean, which compared to others in this space, I think, we've seen some players in your space raise a lot of money and grow really, really quickly. So I'm curious just sort of where that mindset comes from, why you've decided that this is your preferred path. And for founders that are thinking about going down that path, right? I would say the alternative path, right? That maybe people don't know exists, right? For founding a company. What should they know about it as somebody that's done it before? What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? And what should they know about the path that lies ahead of them?
Yeah, this is a question that's very dear to me, and actually almost always when I advise startups, one of the things that I realize is that actually they're putting the cart before the horse, as in they are seeking money without understanding what a kind of acceleration that additional capital will bring them, and that I think is something that you should be consciously thinking about as a founder. Now, we did our previous company. Actually, we bootstrapped and our way through. And one of the things we realized is that there is a fair amount of given that you can work with remote teams, right? The best of the best across not just the US, but across the world, right? So there are efficiencies there, right, that you can bring about. The other side of it is if your GTM is focused on product-led growth itself, like you'll have people land into your product and try the product, and the product is easy to use, then it brings about a fair number of efficiencies in terms of the sales process. So those are the two things that we really anchor on. The third thing we really do well is as founders, Nalin and I actually insert ourselves a lot in like whether it is customer success, right? Understanding the core thing that our customers need, right? Building first, prioritizing those things into the product, and secondly, selling ourselves, right? Marketing, getting the wheels in motion ourselves before we bring in an additional team member. So it's all driven very much by us as founders getting into the weeds and understanding the process so that those efficiencies are not broken as we scale the company. So with that, basically, the capital efficiencies come into play. And that's our core belief that you can really do a lot with a limited number of limited capital. And starters by their very nature need to be resource constrained so that they can really make the best use of their time and resources to find out very creatively what is the best go to market, what is the best way to build a product, right? All of that should be a pain for you to do it well, and that I think the founders need to insert upon themselves so that that continues through the life of the company and they are able to grow it very consciously. So now we are 700 customers. And one of the things also we did, not just from our previous experience as Bootstrap founders, but also YC instilled, we went through Y Combinator. with Storylane. And YC instilled in us one thing about this, that money is not always the constraint. It is really what uh, what you're doing with that money, how smartly you are using it. So we do a lot of things ourselves as we scale, and that I think helps us as a company, and also the product led growth motion that we are able to bring about, and that I think every founder should be doing.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you stopping by, telling us about interactive product demos, about Storylane, and the bootstrap journey. It's been really, really insightful. If folks want to follow you along on your journey and learn more about Storylane, where's the best place that they can find you?
So yeah, they should start following me on LinkedIn. That would be one great way to connect, right? And then if you go to Storyline, you will see there's a newsletter for the buying bottlenecks. So that's one thing that they should definitely start doing. And then we have a Storyline LinkedIn page. So we actually have like examples from our customers and a bunch of other announcements that come up, like the webinars that happen every so often. So definitely a great place to follow along as we grow.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Akash, for uh, coming by, sharing your wisdom with us, and best of luck to you and the Storylane team.
Thank you, Justin. It has been a pleasure.